Oliver Grant threw his blazer across the couch like a man trying to fling his own life away. He had sat through another dinner where compliments landed as price tags, where laughter was currency, and every smile came with an invoice. Tonight, someone had taken a selfie with his dessert, toasted to being his favorite ex, and whispered about the helicopter, as if he were a background prop to someone else's story. James, his assistant of 8 years, watched from the kitchen doorway and said quietly that maybe Oliver needed a break. Oliver's laugh was sharp and tired. "No break," he said. "I want to see the truth." A sudden reckless idea cut through the anger. 5 black cards, no limits, 3 days of freedom. No instructions, no trap, just time and money handed to people who lived in his orbit. He wrote names on white envelopes and arranged them across his marble table like a dealer preparing a hand. Daisy, Susanna, Valeria, Naomi, Grace, each name carried its own small history, its own private angle. The plan was simple: give them power and watch what reveals itself. There was cruelty in the thought, and there was curiosity. Oliver told James it was an experiment. James warned it could go wrong. Oliver only smiled and said, "Then let it go wrong." The envelopes were sealed. The penthouse hummed with its usual opulence while outside. The city moved on, oblivious to the little test about to unfold. If you like stories about wealth, choices, and the consequences that follow, take a second to subscribe now, and drop the country you're watching from in the comments so I know where you're watching from. Oliver imagined the predictable: flashy purchases, staged generosity, social media moments. What he did not expect was a single receipt that would make him drive across town and stand in a doorway filled with children, balloons, and laughter. He had no idea how close his life was about to come to being rearranged by something he had called a joke. What he found behind that door would change everything forevermore. Oliver Grant sat at the edge of the leather armchair in his penthouse, his forehead resting against his fist, eyes fixed on the skyline. From the outside, it was the picture of success: glass towers, private jets, whispers of his name in business circles. But in that moment, the billionaire CEO looked like a man cornered by his own fortune. The night before had been humiliating in a quiet, bitter way. His date had leaned across the table, called him her favorite ex, and raised a glass of sparkling wine. Not to him, not to who he was, but to his money. To the helicopter she bragged about, to the expensive dessert she snapped a photo with. The woman who once claimed to care for him now treated him like a brand logo. He hadn't been a man in her eyes, he had been a credit score. James, his assistant of nearly a decade, tidied papers at the counter. He had seen Oliver like this too many times before, restless after another evening where people valued the bank account more than the soul. "Sir," James said calmly, "maybe it's time to take a step back. You need space, a trip, some air." Oliver turned, and the sharpness in his gaze made James pause. "No, James, I don't need air. I need truth." There was silence. Then Oliver stood, pacing across the room, speaking more to himself than to James. "Every smile is fake. Every compliment rehearsed. They don't see me. They see what I can buy. I want to know who they really are when money has no strings attached." James raised a brow. "That sounds dangerous." Oliver stopped pacing, grabbed a pen, and wrote 5 names across 5 envelopes. He set them on the marble table one by one. "Not dangerous. Necessary. Each of them will get this." James stepped closer and saw the matte black envelopes. His chest tightened. "Please don't tell me those are what I think they are." "They are. Black cards, unlimited, 3 days each. No rules, no instructions, just freedom to spend however they want." Oliver leaned back, his lips curling into the faintest smirk. "Let's see what freedom reveals." James exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "Sir, when you use that tone, something always ends up in headlines or therapy." But Oliver wasn't listening. He was already visualizing the faces that would light up when he handed them the cards. First was Daisy, his ex-girlfriend. A model of charm on the surface, but obsessed with appearances, validation, and the spotlight. She knew how to turn heads, and she knew how to use Oliver's name like a glittering accessory. "She'll grab the card like a stage prop," Oliver muttered. "She'll show me exactly who she is." Next was Susanna, his assistant. Bright, capable, ambitious. The kind of woman who made work look effortless while keeping her eye on opportunities. Oliver respected her sharpness, but he wanted to see if ambition would turn into greed when handed unlimited power. Then Valeria, a socialite who seemed to glide into every room as if she owned it. Always flirtatious, always strategic. She spoke of art, elegance, and fine taste, but Oliver had always suspected she viewed people as steps in a ladder. Let's see how high she tries to climb when the ladder has no ceiling, he murmured. Fourth, Naomi. On paper, she was the philanthropist, the one who spoke passionately about causes and community. But Oliver had seen the cracks. Her generosity often coincided with cameras, her donations perfectly timed for maximum publicity. If money exposes truth, Naomi will show whether her heart is real or rented, Oliver said quietly. Finally, Grace, the housekeeper. The one who moved through his penthouse humming songs while vacuuming, the one who never asked him for anything, who once scolded him for stirring risotto too soon. Grace treated him like a man who lived upstairs, not a billionaire who owned skyscrapers. She's the wild card, Oliver admitted. The one who might surprise me most. James shook his head, disbelief written across his face. You're giving the same card to your ex, your assistant, a socialite, a philanthropist, and the maid? Do you know what you're inviting? Oliver straightened, the decision firm in his voice. I'm inviting honesty. And honesty, James, is worth more than every cent in this city. The 5 envelopes gleamed under the chandelier like loaded dice waiting to be thrown. Somewhere inside Oliver, anticipation sparked. He didn't know it yet, but those names on black envelopes would lead him to truths money could never buy, and to a discovery that would leave him shaken to his core. And with that, the game was set. The first envelope left Oliver's desk the following morning, slipped into Daisy's manicured hand as she swept into the penthouse lobby in oversized sunglasses and perfume that announced her before her voice did. Daisy had always been theatrical, a woman who knew every room was a stage and every audience a potential follower. Ollie, she cooed, lowering her glasses with a mischievous smile. You didn't call last night? Trying to make me miss you? Oliver didn't flinch. He handed her the black envelope. This is for you. She raised a brow, tore it open, and froze. Her eyes widened as the sleek black card caught the light. For a second, she looked like a child at Christmas. Then her lips curved into the triumphant smile he remembered too well. Oh, Oliver, still spoiling me. I knew you couldn't resist. He said nothing, just nodded. 3 days. Do what you like. She leaned in, kissed him on the cheek as if paparazzi were hidden behind the concierge desk, and breezed out the door, heels clicking like applause. Within hours, James returned with the first alerts. Sir, Daisy's transactions just came through. Oliver swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Tell me. James adjusted his tablet. Helicopter rental, $12,000. Designer handbags, 3 of them, all limited edition. Dinner for 10 at Skyline Club, and... James paused. She posted all of it on Instagram. Oliver's jaw tightened. Show me. The tablet lit up with Daisy's feed. There she was, stepping off the helicopter in a red silk dress, hair blowing in the wind. Caption: When your favorite man knows how to treat you like the queen you are. The next post was a carousel of handbags lined on a table, her fingers grazing each logo like they were trophies. Another showed her raising a glass of champagne, tagging Oliver in the caption, grateful for the best supporter in my life, always investing in me. Supporter, not partner, not man, just supporter. James glanced at Oliver. She's turning you into a brand campaign. She always was, Oliver muttered. He leaned back, watching the likes climb by the thousands. Daisy's comment section exploded with envy and admiration. Goals. Find me a man like him. Helicopter vibes only. For Daisy, this wasn't just spending, it was performance. Every dollar was a spotlight. Every purchase, a prop. She had turned his gesture into free advertising for herself. By the second day, Daisy had raised the stakes. A video showed her landing the helicopter at a rooftop lounge, arms spread wide as if she had conquered the city. She shouted into the camera, "When your man believes in you, nothing is out of reach." The crowd behind her cheered, mistaking indulgence for empowerment. James scrolled through the feed, incredulous. Sir, she tagged you in a story with the words, silent investor. Oliver clenched his fist. Investor? The third day was worse. Daisy hosted a dinner with a dozen influencers, all dressed in glittering gowns. She ordered the most expensive bottles of wine, posed with every course, and let her guests toast not to friendship or love, but to her undeniable worth. At the end of the night, she lifted her glass and said, "Here's to Oliver Grant, the man who always comes through." The video cut to applause, laughter, and camera flashes. But the only face missing from the table was Oliver's. Back at the penthouse, Oliver stood by the window, arms crossed, listening to James read the totals. The spending was astronomical, But it wasn't the money that bothered him. It was the way Daisy had twisted it, repackaged his gesture into a narrative where he was the faceless sponsor and she the star. "James," he said quietly, "do you see it?" "See what, sir?" "She doesn't care about the card. She cares about the stage it gives her. I wasn't giving her freedom. I was giving her a megaphone." James closed the tablet. "Are you surprised?" Oliver shook his head, staring at the city lights that looked suddenly cold. "No, just disappointed at how predictable it was." He turned away from the window, but not before muttering under his breath, "One card down, 4 more to go. Let's see who shows me something real." And with Daisy's glittering performance echoing across social media, Oliver braced himself for the next envelope to be opened. When Susanna walked into Oliver's office, she carried the same quiet authority that had kept his empire running smoothly for years. She was precise, organized, and the only one who dared to challenge him in board meetings without flinching. If Daisy thrived on spectacle, Susanna thrived on control. Oliver slid the black envelope across the desk. "For you," he said. She glanced down, confused. "Is this a bonus? We just closed the Atlanta deal. I thought you'd wait until quarterly reviews." "Not a bonus. Consider it an opportunity. 3 days, no limit, no restrictions." Her fingers tapped the envelope. She didn't tear it open like Daisy had. Instead, she studied him, her eyes sharp. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Oliver said, leaning back. "Spend it however you want. I want to see what you do." Her lips pressed into a thoughtful line. Then, with a small nod, she slipped the envelope into her bag. "Very well, Mr. Grant. You'll have your answer." By that evening, James was already monitoring the transactions. "Sir," he said, walking in with the tablet. Susanna started. Oliver set down his pen. "Go on." "First stop, Bergdorf Goodman. She bought 4 tailored suits, each above $3,000. Shoes, handbags, and a Cartier bracelet." Oliver frowned. "Jewelry?" "Yes, and then—" James scrolled. "The Apple flagship store. She bought the latest MacBook Pro, 2 iPads, and a custom iPhone, all engraved with her initials." Oliver rubbed his temple. "Initials?" She branded the purchases. The next day, the spending continued. A private stylist consultation, designer eyewear, reservations at high-end restaurants where she was photographed, menus spread out like trophies. James hesitated before reading further. "Sir, she also booked a photo shoot." "A photo shoot?" "Yes. Professional portraits, LinkedIn updates, branding packages." She captioned one post online, "Power dressing for a powerful future." Oliver stared at the screen. The images showed Susanna draped in her new wardrobe, chin tilted upward, a diamond glinting on her wrist. The comments were full of admiration. "Boss energy." "She looks unstoppable." Oliver exhaled slowly. "Unstoppable for herself, not for me." On the 3rd day, Susanna returned to the office as if nothing had changed. She placed a folder on his desk, reports perfectly organized, her manner professional as always. But Oliver couldn't ignore the sparkle of the bracelet on her wrist, the faint scent of new leather from her handbag. "Did the card treat you well?" Oliver asked. She smiled politely. "I invested in myself. You've always said appearances matter in this world. If I'm going to represent your empire, I need to look the part." "Invested?" Oliver repeated, studying her face. "Yes," she continued, voice confident. "Every meeting, every client, people judge first impressions. When they see me, they should see someone who belongs at your side. Someone as polished as the empire she represents. These purchases weren't indulgence. They were strategy." It was a clever argument, one Oliver might have admired in another context. But beneath her reasoning, he saw the truth. She hadn't bought tools for the empire. She had bought symbols for herself. Status, identity, power. And the way she relished that bracelet, the way she'd broadcast her transformation online, revealed a hunger that made his stomach twist. James, waiting silently by the door, caught Oliver's expression. Later, when they were alone, he spoke carefully. "She was supposed to be the exception, wasn't she?" Oliver didn't answer immediately. He turned toward the city skyline, lights flickering like endless dollar signs. Finally, he said, "She was. I thought loyalty meant she saw me, not just the empire, but ambition. Ambition always finds a way to take more." For the first time, Oliver felt a pang of betrayal deeper than Daisy's glittering displays. Daisy was predictable. She had always been hungry for the stage. But Susanna had been trusted, privy to his secrets, his schedules, the gears that kept his world spinning. And now, with unlimited freedom, she had shown her truest desire. Not to serve the empire, but to climb it. Oliver poured himself a drink, the glass steady in his hand, though his thoughts were not. 2 cards spent. Both told me the same story. Maybe I'm the fool for expecting anything different. He didn't know it yet, but the third envelope, waiting in Valeria's hands, would only deepen that lesson. Valeria received her envelope with a smile that belonged on the cover of a glossy magazine. She was dressed for a photo shoot, even on an ordinary Tuesday morning, diamonds at her ears and a silk scarf tied perfectly at her throat. She twirled the black envelope between her fingers as if it were a prop. "This isn't some trick, is it, Oliver?" she asked, her voice playful, but her eyes sharp. "No trick," Oliver replied. 3 days. Spend it however you like." Her smile widened. "How generous." She leaned close, brushed his shoulder with her hand, and whispered, "You'll be proud of me." Oliver watched her glide out of the penthouse, her perfume lingering like the echo of a promise he knew better than to trust. By nightfall, James delivered the first report. "Sir," Valeria wasted no time. She hired a public relations firm, booked the Marlowe Hotel ballroom, and placed an order for 600 bottles of champagne. Oliver raised a brow. "For what?" "A gala. Invitations have already gone out. She's calling it a charity benefit." "Charity?" Oliver's tone dripped with disbelief. James nodded grimly. "The decor alone is over $200,000. Gold-trimmed menus, crystal chandeliers flown in from Paris, and, get this, a champagne tower tall enough to touch the ballroom's ceiling." Oliver stared at the city lights outside his window, shaking his head. "And the charity?" "Vague. Something about youth empowerment. No details. But the guest list, half the city's elite, politicians, celebrities, CEOs. She's building her guest list like a ladder." On the second day, the spending accelerated. Valeria commissioned a designer to craft a custom gown for herself, ordered velvet carpets for the ballroom, and booked a string quartet alongside a DJ to keep the event balanced. James showed Oliver her latest post online, Valeria holding up the black card like it was a trophy. Caption: "Grateful for the trust placed in me. Can't wait to reveal something unforgettable." Oliver's jaw tightened. She's not throwing a gala for charity. She's throwing a gala for Valeria. The third evening arrived, and Oliver couldn't resist seeing the spectacle for himself. He stepped into the Marlowe ballroom, greeted by a flood of lights and glitter. A massive banner read, "The Valeria Initiative, an evening of elegance." Waiters in white gloves floated by with trays of oysters and champagne flutes. The air was thick with laughter, handshakes, and the clinking of glasses. At the center of it all stood Valeria, draped in her custom gown, surrounded by cameras. She raised a glass and smiled as though she had orchestrated the night with her own sweat and sacrifice. "Thank you all for joining this incredible evening," she said, her voice carrying over the microphone. "Together, we will inspire change. Tonight is not about me, it's about the future." But every spotlight in the room was trained on her. Every camera clicked at her smile. Every cheer rose in her name. Oliver remained near the edge of the crowd, unnoticed. He saw the way Valeria leaned into the mayor's ear with laughter, the way she posed with celebrities who had never answered his calls, the way she made sure to tag him in a single understated line at the bottom of the event brochure. Special thanks to Oliver Grant for supporting the vision. Supporting the vision. Nothing more. Not a man, not a partner, not even a co-host. Just the faceless benefactor whose money had built her stage. When the champagne tower collapsed halfway through the evening, spilling golden liquid across the velvet carpets, Valeria laughed it off with practiced charm. "A little excess is part of progress," she quipped, sending the crowd into more applause. Oliver felt none of it. His chest tightened with the realization that she hadn't used his money to uplift anyone but herself. This wasn't a gala, it was an audition. An audition for higher circles, more powerful rooms, the kind of connections that could catapult her beyond him. As he walked out of the ballroom, James fell into step beside him. "She sees you as a ladder," James said softly. Oliver's voice was low, almost bitter. "No, James. To her, I'm not even a ladder. I'm just the rung she'll step on before she reaches the next one." The night air outside was cool against his face, but it did nothing to soften the weight pressing on his chest. 3 cards down. 3 reminders of what money exposed and what it destroyed. And still, 2 envelopes remained. Naomi accepted her envelope with both hands, her smile soft and saintly, as if the black card were a candle passed down in a sacred ritual. She was known for that look, the serene expression, the calm voice that made her sound like she cared more than anyone else in the room. To the public, Naomi was the woman who chaired charity luncheons, spoke about giving back, and posted photos with children from villages she'd visited once. To Oliver, she was a mystery, someone who always seemed to shine when the cameras were rolling. "This isn't necessary," she said gently, though she kept the card clutched tight in her hand. "You already give so much to the world." "No rules," Oliver told her. 3 days. Do whatever you want." She nodded, her smile deepening like she'd just been handed destiny. "Then I'll make it count." By evening, James came with the first update. "Naomi's transactions are in," he said, sliding the tablet across Oliver's desk. Oliver leaned forward. "Let me guess. Donations?" James shook his head. "A reservation at Solara Wellness Retreat. 3 nights in the presidential villa. Spa services, meditation sessions, and a private yoga instructor flown in from Bali." Oliver's eyes narrowed. "And this is supposed to help who?" She labeled the expense as self-alignment for community leadership. Oliver let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course she did. The second day, the charges grew stranger. Private jet flights, a curated photo package from a luxury marketing firm, silk robes embroidered with the logo of a global peace initiative she had just announced. James read each line with disbelief. She booked a photographer to follow her during sunrise meditations. She bought 3 drones for aerial footage. And get this, she paid influencers to repost her photos with captions about renewed leadership for humanity. Oliver rubbed his temple, disgust settling in. She's branding enlightenment. On social media, Naomi's feed was glowing. There she was, sitting cross-legged in a robe by an infinity pool, the black card discreetly resting on a cushion beside her. The caption read, "Healing myself so I can heal the world. Gratitude to those who believe in me." The comments praised her dedication. "Such an inspiration. True servant leader. She's the future we need." But Oliver saw what the others didn't. The spa treatments, the stage group photos, the luxury setting. It wasn't service, it was spectacle. By the 3rd day, Naomi staged a press conference at the retreat. She stood at a podium draped with her new initiative's banner, speaking passionately about global change. Cameras flashed as she declared, "The future depends on our willingness to rise above selfishness. Together, we can create a world that values compassion over greed." Her voice trembled with practiced conviction. Behind her, the champagne glasses on the table gleamed, and the guests, fellow elites, nodded solemnly while sipping imported wine. Oliver watched the live stream from his penthouse, his jaw tight. The irony burned. She had spent his money not to feed the hungry or shelter the homeless, but to build an image polished enough to fool the world. James muted the screen. "Do you want me to cut the funding?" "No," Oliver said quietly. His eyes were fixed on Naomi's image, frozen mid-sentence, her hand raised as if blessing the audience. "Let her finish. The truth has already spoken louder than her words." That night, when Naomi returned the card, she placed it delicately on his desk, as if it were a sacred offering. "I used it to realign my spirit," she said softly, "because a strong leader must first be whole. I did it for the people." Oliver looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt nothing but cold clarity. "You didn't do it for the people. You did it for the applause." Naomi blinked, her composure faltering for just a heartbeat, then quickly recovered. "Perception is reality, Oliver. If people believe in my vision, they'll follow me. That's what matters." When she left, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Oliver poured himself a drink and stood by the window, staring into the dark horizon. 4 cards down, and the pattern was clear. Wealth hadn't revealed generosity. It had magnified vanity, ambition, and self-interest. But there was still one envelope left, given to the woman least likely to use it for herself. And deep down, Oliver felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt all week. A dangerous, impossible thing. Grace didn't enter Oliver's office the way the others did. No perfume cloud, no high heels clicking across the marble. She came through the side door, a dish towel over her shoulder, her hands dusted with flour. "Mr. Grant, the oven's making that coughing noise again," she said, setting a bowl of dough on the counter. Her voice was steady, practical, as if she'd been born with a mop in one hand and patience in the other. Oliver reached for the final envelope, his lips quirking into a small smile. "Grace, I have something for you." She frowned, wiping her hands. "If it's about the oven, just tell me where to call. Don't look at me like that." He handed her the envelope. "It's for you." She opened it cautiously, her eyes widening as the black card slid into her palm. "This isn't real." "It is. 3 days. No rules, no limits." She blinked, clutching the card like it might vanish if she breathed too hard. "Sir," The only black card I've ever held was the one that changes the TV input. Oliver chuckled, but she stayed serious. What am I supposed to do with this? Buy a yacht? Get a gold-plated mop? Anything you want, Oliver said. Anything at all. Grace studied him with suspicion. You feeling sick? Because this sounds like a fever dream. Take it, Grace. His voice softened. It's a gift. Reluctantly, she slipped the card into her pocket. Fine, but don't blame me when you find 50 pounds of rice on your bill. By the next morning, James entered Oliver's office, tablet in hand. Sir, you should see this. Oliver sipped his coffee. Another helicopter? No, sir. Groceries, bags of rice, canned beans, diapers, second-hand toys, paint, and brushes. Oliver raised a brow. Groceries? For herself? Doesn't look like it. The receipts list bulk orders. And then, James hesitated, his lips twitching. She bought 200 hot dogs. Oliver nearly spilled his drink. 200 hot dogs? Yes. And a clown costume. Medium size. Red nose included. Oliver set the cup down, staring. Grace bought a clown costume with an unlimited card? That's not all. She rented a van for the weekend. Pickup location, downtown. For a long moment, Oliver said nothing. Then he leaned back, a laugh breaking free. Daisy buys helicopters. Susanna buys herself a throne. Valeria throws a circus with champagne towers. And Grace, she's the clown with hot dogs. What in the world is she planning? The second day, the pattern continued. More receipts, balloons, arts and crafts supplies, packs of sugar, colorful tablecloths. No designer labels, no staged social media posts. Just practical items, purchased in bulk, like someone preparing for an event no billionaire would ever think to attend. James stood by the window, scrolling through the data. Sir, I can't figure it out. It doesn't add up. She isn't buying for herself. She isn't even buying for friends. Every order looks like preparation. But for what? Oliver's mind kept circling back to the image of Grace humming while vacuuming, calling him Mr. Grant like his billions meant nothing. Now she had more money at her fingertips than most people would ever see in a lifetime, and she was spending it on crayons, diapers, and hot dogs. Curiosity clawed at him. That evening, Grace returned from her errands humming as usual, a faint streak of paint on her cheek. Oliver watched her from the doorway of the kitchen. Long day? She looked up, startled. Oh, hi, boss. Yeah, lots to do. Lots to do with 200 hot dogs? She froze, then laughed nervously. You've been checking the receipts, of course. His tone was firm, but his eyes glimmered with amusement. What exactly are you planning, Grace? She gave him a mischievous smile, the kind of smile that didn't ask for permission. Wait and see. Oliver studied her for a long moment, sensing a secret she wasn't ready to reveal. For the first time since the experiment began, he wasn't disgusted or disappointed. He was intrigued. James appeared at the doorway, whispering once Grace had gone. Sir, she's hiding something. Oliver didn't take his eyes off the hallway where she had disappeared. Not hiding. Building. And whatever it is, I need to see it with my own eyes. The billionaire who thought he had seen every scheme, every selfish desire money could buy, suddenly found himself waiting for a clown costume and 200 hot dogs to explain the truest mystery of them all. And for the first time, he couldn't wait. Oliver was restless the next morning. Grace moved about the penthouse with her usual rhythm, humming off-key, wiping down counters, sprinkling flour over dough, as if the world outside didn't exist. But Oliver couldn't focus on reports or meetings. Every receipt, every bizarre purchase, hot dogs, balloons, paints rattled around in his mind like pieces of a puzzle begging to be solved. By noon, James slipped into the study. Sir, the van Grace rented just checked in at a location uptown, St. Francis Home. It's listed as a shelter and children's support center. Oliver shut the file in front of him. Get the car. The black SUV rolled to a quiet neighborhood Oliver rarely passed through. He expected run-down streets, but instead found tidy houses, flower pots on windowsills, and a modest brick building with a hand-painted sign. St. Francis Home. Outside, the van Grace had rented sat with its doors wide open, boxes stacked inside. Oliver stepped out, the air buzzing with the laughter of children drifting from the courtyard. He paused, listening. It was a sound so rare in his world of boardrooms and negotiations. Pure, uncalculated joy. He moved closer. Through the open gate, he saw Grace. She was in full clown costume, striped jumpsuit, floppy shoes, red nose that kept slipping as she bent over balloon animals. Her hair was tied in a messy bun beneath a bright wig, and her face paint smudged every time she laughed. Around her, children swarmed, shouting with delight as balloons twisted and popped. All right, watch closely. Grace announced, her voice playful. She twisted the balloon dramatically, only for it to burst in her hands with a loud snap. She froze for a beat, then threw her arms up. Ta-da! Confetti! The kids roared with laughter. Oliver leaned against the gate, stunned. He had expected waste, maybe a private party for her friends. Not this. Not Grace spending his limitless card to bring color and laughter into the lives of children who had so little. Inside the courtyard, long tables were covered with paper tablecloths, buckets of crayons, stacks of cheap toys and paints. The air smelled of grilled sausages, smoke curling into the sky. Grace moved from child to child, crouching to eye level, offering a balloon hat here, a hug there. When one little girl tripped and scraped her knee, Grace immediately dropped the balloons, pulled off her red nose, and knelt beside her. "Hey, sweetheart, let's see," she said gently, brushing away tears. She opened a small pouch and pulled out a colorful Band-Aid, pressing it on the child's knee. "There, magic healing powers, but only if you promise to jump 3 times. The girl sniffled, then hopped 3 times on her good leg. Grace clapped and the children cheered. Watching from the shade of a tree, Oliver felt something stir in his chest, something unfamiliar. Admiration, maybe. Envy, even. Grace, with no wealth, no spotlight, had given these children a day more valuable than anything Daisy's helicopters or Valeria's champagne towers could buy. "Mr. Grant?" a voice asked softly. An older woman approached, wiping her hands on an apron. "I'm Margaret, the director. You must be Grace's employer." Oliver nodded slowly. "What's happening here?" "It's Grace's doing," Margaret said with a warm smile. "Every year she comes back, tries to give the children something to look forward to. This year, she went all out, said she had a little extra help." Oliver's throat tightened. He looked back at Grace, now flipping hot dogs on a portable grill. She fumbled with the tongs, burning one, then laughed at herself while the children teased her. Margaret chuckled. "She grew up here, you know. Never forgot us." Unable to resist, Oliver crossed the yard. Grace turned, eyes widening when she saw him. "Mr. Grant? What are you doing here?" "I heard about the party," he said, keeping his voice even. "Thought I'd help." Grace blinked, then smirked beneath the paint. "All right then, boss. Grab a spatula. Let's see if you can handle hot dogs better than boardrooms." He took the spatula, fumbling clumsily as the sausages slipped and nearly rolled off the grill. The children laughed at his mishaps, swarming him with questions. "Are you really rich? Do you have a dragon?" And Grace joined in, teasing him like he wasn't a billionaire, but just another pair of hands. For the first time in years, Oliver laughed without calculation. Standing beside Grace, grease on his shirt, ketchup on his fingers, he felt the world shift. She hadn't used his money to impress or elevate herself. She had used it to give. And that truth, simple and unpolished, shook him more than all the others combined. In the middle of that courtyard, with children tugging at his sleeve and Grace's laughter echoing in his ears, Oliver Grant, billionaire CEO, saw what money could never buy: a genuine heart. The day after the orphanage party, Oliver couldn't shake the images from his mind. The laughter of children, the bright balloons, the way Grace had looked in that clown costume, ridiculous, smudged with paint, yet more alive than anyone else he'd given a card to. He had seen Daisy chasing cameras, Susanna dressing ambition, Naomi bathing in staged virtue, Valeria climbing social ladders, but Grace had taken limitless power and spent it on joy. On others. By mid-afternoon, Oliver found himself restless in his own office. He called out to James without thinking, "What kind of coffee does Grace like?" James looked up, startled. "Instant. She complains the Italian machine in the kitchen is too pretentious." Oliver smirked. "Perfect. Cancel my next meeting." He found Grace later that evening scrubbing a pan in the penthouse kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, humming badly off-key. "Grace," he said, leaning against the counter. She glanced up. "Yes, boss? How about we get some coffee? Not the machine, somewhere outside." Grace blinked, frozen in place. "You and me? Coffee? Are you having a midlife crisis?" Oliver laughed. "Maybe. Humor me." 20 minutes later, they sat in a small corner cafe downtown, a place where nobody cared about his billions. The lights were warm, the tables scratched with years of use, the smell of cheap roast filling the air. Grace stirred sugar into her mug with unnecessary force, clearly uncomfortable. "So," she said finally, "why drag me here? I've got dishes waiting." "I want to understand," Oliver replied. "Why you spent the card the way you did." She shrugged, eyes on her cup. "I told you, hot dogs, balloons, kids love that stuff." "Grace," his tone was steady, but his eyes searched hers. "Why an orphanage? Why not yourself? You had 3 days. You could have bought anything. Her spoon stilled. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she set it down, folding her hands. Because I grew up there, she said quietly. That was my home. Oliver leaned back, surprised. My mother left me there when I was a baby, she continued, her voice calm but edged with something fragile. She was young, broke, and scared. Left a note saying she loved me but couldn't give me a future. I stayed until I turned 18, never got adopted. Not once. Watched other kids leave with new families while I stayed behind, year after year. Her words cut sharper than any socialite's insults. Oliver felt the weight in her tone, not self-pity, but honesty. It wasn't all bad, she added quickly, forcing a small smile. Margaret, the director, you met her. She was like a mother. The other kids were my brothers and sisters. I learned how to cook in that kitchen, though I still burn half the food. I learned that laughter could cover the holes in your heart. And I learned that when you've been given nothing, giving to someone else is the best way to feel rich. Oliver stared at her, humbled. The others had used the card as a weapon, a mirror, a ladder. Grace had used it as a gift. I didn't need handbags or helicopters, she said, looking up at him. I needed to see those kids smile, because I know what it's like to be the kid who waits by the window for someone who never shows up. Silence settled between them. In the background, the barista clattered cups, but Oliver barely heard it. He was too busy studying the woman across from him. Silver paint still faintly stained her nails, her hair pulled back carelessly, her clothes ordinary. And yet, she radiated something none of the others had possessed. Grace sipped her coffee and gave a half laugh. Honestly, Mr. Grant, I think I spent your millions on the cheapest party in history. But it worked. For one day, those kids felt like the world hadn't forgotten them. Oliver felt his chest tighten in a way unfamiliar to him. He had been surrounded by excess all his life, yet sitting in that worn-out cafe, listening to Grace talk about scraped knees and laughter, he realized he'd never been poorer or richer than in this moment. He lifted his cup. To the cheapest party in history, he said softly. Grace clinked her mug against his, and the best. As they drank in silence, Oliver knew the test was already over. Grace, the one with the least privilege, had revealed the most truth. She hadn't just spent his money, she had exposed his blindness. And for the first time, Oliver Grant felt small, in the best possible way. The penthouse was quiet when Oliver finally gathered the 5 envelopes on his desk. The black cards had been returned, each of them carrying a story heavier than the numbers logged on James's tablet. He sat back in his chair, staring at them like relics of a failed experiment. "Shall I prepare the report, sir?" James asked. Oliver waved him off. "No need. I know what each one meant." He tapped the first envelope. Daisies, helicopters, designer handbags, rooftop selfies, all broadcast to the world as though love could be proven with champagne and hashtags. She had treated the card not as freedom, but as a stage prop, and Oliver as the faceless sponsor. She had always been predictable, but seeing it magnified was like swallowing ash. The second, her spending had been disciplined, branded as investment, suits, jewelry, tech, all framed as tools to sharpen her image. But beneath the clever words, Oliver had seen the truth. Ambition disguised as loyalty. She hadn't bought for the empire, she had bought for her own ascent. And the betrayal cut deeper because he had once trusted her to be different. The third, Valeria. A gala draped in velvet and gold, a champagne tower stretching towards ceilings, a night of applause where she held court in the center of it all. She had called it charity, but it had been nothing more than a launchpad for herself. Oliver remembered the way she'd leaned into the mayor's ear with laughter, how she had listed his name on the program only as special thanks. To her, he had been nothing but a rung on the ladder she intended to climb. The fourth, Naomi, the so-called philanthropist. Spiritual retreats, branded robes, sunrise photo shoots. She had spoken of self-alignment for the sake of humanity while soaking in luxury and applause. Her generosity had been a costume, stitched together for cameras. She hadn't bought healing for others. She had purchased validation for herself. And finally, Grace, the one he had expected the least from. She had spent his limitless wealth on groceries, toys, balloons, paint, 200 hot dogs, a clown costume. He had thought it madness until he followed her to the orphanage and saw what she created. A world of laughter, a day where children believed magic still belonged to them. Grace, who had grown up with nothing, had given everything she could, and in the process taught him what none of his billions had ever managed. That real wealth wasn't in the card, but in the heart holding it. Oliver sat in silence, his gaze locked on Grace's envelope. For years she had been the maid, the background figure who hummed while scrubbing pans. Now he realized she was the only one who had treated power as responsibility instead of indulgence. James cleared his throat softly. "Sir, what do you want to do with them?" Oliver picked up Grace's envelope, his fingers tightening around it. "I want her name to last longer than mine." The following week, the announcement shook his circle of influence. At a press conference, Oliver stood before the cameras, no smirk on his face, no theatrics in his tone. "I began a test," he told the crowd. "I handed limitless wealth to people close to me. Most used it to serve themselves. But one woman with no titles, no fame, no privilege, used it to give joy to children who had nothing. That woman is Grace." Gasps rippled through the room. Executives exchanged puzzled looks. Reporters scribbled furiously. "Today," Oliver continued, "I am establishing the Grace Foundation. Its mission is simple: to provide opportunities, shelter, and hope for children who feel forgotten. This foundation will carry her name because she reminded me what wealth is truly for." When Grace was invited onto the stage, she looked out of place in her plain dress, hands trembling as she tried to hide behind her smile. But Oliver stepped back, giving her the spotlight. For once, he wasn't the billionaire on display, he was just the man who had finally learned how to listen. Later that evening, in the quiet of his penthouse, Oliver poured a glass of whiskey and stared out over the city. Daisy, Susanna, Valeria, Naomi, their choices had revealed the emptiness that followed when wealth fed only itself. Grace had revealed something else, that money is a magnifier, and only hearts like hers can make it shine. James joined him by the window. "Sir, do you regret the test?" Oliver shook his head slowly. "No. It cost me illusions, but it gave me truth. And truth is worth more than every cent in this city." He raised the glass, almost in a toast, to the absent maid who had been anything but ordinary. "True wealth," he whispered, "is revealed by what we give away." In the end, the experiment was never about the card. It was about the people who held it. Daisy turned it into a stage light. Susanna turned it into a mirror of her ambition. Valeria built a tower of champagne on it, and Naomi wrapped it in robes of false virtue. Each of them revealed what Oliver had always feared, that wealth doesn't change people, it only magnifies what's already there. But Grace proved something different. With the same limitless power in her hands, she didn't chase a stage or a title or a ladder to climb. She chose balloons, crayons, hot dogs, and laughter. She chose to give instead of take, to heal instead of impress. And in doing so, she reminded a billionaire what all his money had failed to teach him, that true richness lies not in what we own, but in what we give away. Oliver Grant's life changed after that. He poured his resources into causes that mattered, not for applause, not for profit, but because Grace had shown him that dignity and hope were worth more than helicopters and champagne. From that day forward, his empire no longer carried just his name, it carried hers too. And that is the lesson hidden in the black card. Unlimited wealth in the wrong hands only inflates vanity. But in the right hands, it can create joy, restore faith, and plant seeds of change. Now I'll leave you with this question. What would you have done with the black card? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to tell us the country you're watching from. And if this story moved you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars at all, but in the lives we choose to touch.